Good evening, I'm Pat Morrison, and our top story tonight is kids, computers, and literacy and what that triumvirate promises. California already spends millions of dollars each year to put computers in every classroom, and politicians from President Clinton to Governor Davis have been touting the benefits of computers as teaching tools. In some cases, computers are edging out art and music and physical education programs, both in terms of class time and classroom dollars. But before we all climb aboard the high-tech bandwagon, some experts are warning us to wait a minute. We need to be sure that computers will indeed deliver something more than mouse skills. So far, they say there is no hard evidence that computers can improve learning significantly. Gay Yee has more.
This is a tale of two schools, Open Charter in Los Angeles, where you'll find computers integrated into every classroom, and Highland Hall in Northridge, where you won't find a computer in any classroom at all. Two schools with similar goals, to teach youngsters to be lifelong learners, but their means to that end is quite different.
In order for me to do the job that I need to do to prepare my kids for the 21st century, this is it. If I do not use them, I'm not doing what I should be doing in order to prepare them for the world that they're going to live in.
BJ Allen Conn is a 4th and 5th grade teacher at Open Charter and a member of the school's tech team. Open Charter is one of the most technologically advanced public schools in the nation. 15 years ago, it was adopted by the Apple Computer Company in an educational experiment. Every classroom is wired to the internet, and there's a computer to every 2 students.
It's sometimes boring when sitting down and just listening to the teacher, when you could be on a computer, typing, and having fun.
Allen Conn believes computers improve teaching practices and student achievement, even though it's never been proven in the research. Her proof, she says, is her students.
I truly believe our kids are more articulate, they're better problem solvers, they're better writers, because we have the technology here.
While the faculty here encourages students to thumb a ride on the information superhighway, the teachers at Highland Hall believe that kids should learn problem-solving skills the old-fashioned way through hands-on experience.
But at Highland Hall, things are different. Kindergartners learn to count by jumping rope and spend the day hand crocheting and creating animals out of beeswax. The school believes in the Waldorf philosophy that children learn best, especially in the early childhood years, using a hands-on approach.
They need to have the foundation of good motor skills, of all the synapses and neural pathways in place as a result of having played well.
Who can tell me a little something what you know about ancient Greece? What did we learn?
There is little technology at Highland Hall because the faculty believes the students become less socialized, less motivated, and less imaginative. They believe using computers robs the student of a cherished commodity in learning, time, like the time you had to take to look up a word.
But think of all the process that you went through in searching for that word in the dictionary. How many new words you were exposed to. What the experience was. You had that luxury of time. The computer gives you the answer like that.
5th grade teacher Lisa Simima says a computer is just a tool. And even as we face the 21st century, she believes the old tools are better.
You're free to express yourself. And that is the participatory part of learning that is sometimes missed with computers. And children, young children, have to learn by doing. That's how they learn best.
2 schools of thought. Open Charter believes teaching students this technology is its obligation to prepare them for the real world of the 21st century. Although Highland Hall questions whether this virtual world is a real world at all. For Life and Times Tonight, I'm Gay Yee.
The question becomes then whether computers are a teaching tool or merely a costly and trendy toy. We put that question and others to Alan Kay, who was with Apple Computers when he designed the computer system we just saw at Open Charter School. He believes that computers can and should play a key role in children's education. And with us as well is Richard Clark. He is a professor of educational psychology and technology at USC, where he is also an expert in technology-based education. He questions the contribution that computers can make in the classroom. Welcome, gentlemen, both to Life and Times Tonight. You seem to epitomize the 2 versions of education that we see there. But let me start with you, Mr. K. We put a lot of money into technology over the years anyway, and if we're so rich in this country, why aren't we smart?
Well, we could learn how to read better.
Will computers help us read better?
I doubt it. I think that both of the schools you saw are part right and part wrong, because people tend to like to adopt highly focused, almost religious approaches. The real thing about computers is not to emphasize them as a material, because nobody would say we should have a paper-based curriculum. It doesn't really make sense. Curriculum is made out of ideas and techniques and environments for children to explore. And the real question about computers is what is special about it. And one of the things that's special about it is the way you can learn science and math on it. That's what I've devoted my interest to. I don't think it should replace any of the other media that we have, and that isn't the aim even of the open school to do.
Is your concern that you see it squeezing out as a teaching tool, as a substitute even for a teacher rather than as a tool?
I think it's mostly a symbolic token right now, that people are buying it because it's the easiest way to say we're doing something about education. But in fact, the computer won't have any impact until teachers learn how to teach science and math, and when they learn that, the computer will be a natural amplifier, just like it's very hard to learn music unless you have musicians around, and then the piano is a natural amplifier, and the music is not in the piano, it's in the student.
It's in the student. Mr. Clark, you may have some areas of agreement then with Mr. K on this. The example that comes to mind, reading my own newspaper, the LA Times today, a front page story about this very subject, and the reporter used the word discrete. There are two ways to spell discrete. He chose the wrong one for his usage, but the computer only knew that it was spelled correctly, not that it was misused. Was that kind of an example of perhaps our over-reliance on computers to teach us things when in fact we need to program them and learn ourselves before we can make them our tools?
Well, it was interesting that one of the teachers in the piece talked about the fact the computer spots a misspelled word instantly, and of course that's not always the case, but it is the case that her impression was that having computers make decisions and solve problems intellectually is a good approach, and I sort of doubt that's the case.
Why is that?
Well, one of the things about the use of computers in classrooms that's been very obvious in the research on computers for the last 15 years is that children get the idea that it's easier to learn with a computer than it is with a book, for example, or with some other medium. Now, that's wrong, of course. It's not easier. It might be quicker to get certain types of information, but it's not necessarily easier to learn with them. But because they believe that, the evidence is that they take a kind of mindless approach to it. They literally don't work as hard. They don't think as hard. And as a consequence, they don't learn as much.
How would you come down on the side of that, Mr. K, especially the ideas you're hearing from the kids, because it's fun. It's all part of this emphasis that education has to be entertaining, that you need a performance in the classroom.
Well, as Neil Postman pointed out a long time ago, that Sesame Street made it very difficult for kids to go to school because they could never measure up to the production
There was no Big Bird up there.
No Big Birds. And I think I would agree with most of, I'm supposed to be arguing, I know.
Right.
But I would agree with most of this because I think that children, it's just like the piano will play any note in pitch, and so it's a very bad instrument to start off with. It's better to start off with a violin or singing, or both, before you go to the piano, because the piano automates a lot of things that musicians are supposed to pay attention to. That doesn't mean we should throw away the piano. It means that we should take the right approach into going into something that, instead of being a prosthetic, which I think is what most people are worried about, is it's an amplifier.
So the approach, as you say, people seem to be embracing this uncritically, that in fact, rather than the information age, we live in the data age, and people aren't learning how to discern. And some of the numbers that people on your side, Mr. Clark, talk about is how information is retained. Reading is the least effective way to retain information. Talking, watching it, looking at pictures is the most effective, but it seems like we're almost going pre-literate in our embrace of the technology of this.
Too bad you can't argue the merits of democracy using stained glass windows. It would be a snap. So one of the big points about reading is that it is difficult. It's hard fun. And the very important thing about hard fun is it leaves you a different person thereafter. And so trying to use something that smooths the way, that takes you on a ride, I think is the wrong way to look at education. What you want is no gratuitous difficulties, but you want good, hard fun that leads you into making you a different kind of person.
Mr. Clark, how can people in your position put the brakes on, or at least issue some reasonable caveats that will be heeded by the likes of President Clinton, who seems to have embraced this uncritically?
Well, it's a very, very difficult problem because there's a huge political incentive to act as if we've made some serious contribution to schools because we've hooked them up with the internet and put a few computers in schools.
And we wash our hands of it and say we've done our part.
And the evidence is, by the way, that while 90% of the schools in the United States, as of last year, were hooked up to the internet, only about 18% were making any significant use of it in the classroom.
What? I'm sorry, go ahead.
It's just the case that there's a huge amount of information out there for people that is available already. There's more information now that the internet's in classrooms, but people are not making any kind of use of it in any central way in instruction.
And it's not always reliable, as anyone who gets email knows about seeing these matters repeated.
That article you spoke about in the Times this morning mentioned there were 700 different software packages focused on reading and writing alone that were available to schools. And how do you choose among all that? How do you separate out the wheat from the chaff?
I'd like to ask both of you, Mr. Clark, first, one of the great concerns, we've seen studies of it recently, that people who spend something on the order of more than 3 hours a day in front of a computer screen become isolated. Their social skills tend to diminish. And we're talking about adults who've already gone through a socializing process. What does this promise for kids? Because you can't really play a piano à deux except for a few pieces of music written specifically, and you can't sit on a computer two at a time either. What are your concerns on this?
Well, actually, I don't think that's as large an issue as some people do. As a matter of fact, I see some benefits for computer screens for certain types of children who have learning difficulties. It focuses their attention, and attention is usually a big problem with kids, particularly in the earlier years.
Mr. Kay?
Yeah, I think that when we see children in a classroom using computers, they like to double up. That's why we only put one for every 2 kids. We wanted to have plenty around. We wanted to have them in the classroom.
To make them socialize?
No, we didn't want to make them socialize. They already are social. We wanted to allow them to share what they were doing with somebody else. And also, children tend to have different personality temperaments, and so some of them like to be active and some of them like to be thoughtful, and it's generally a good idea to let the kids hook up into groups.
Is part of this simply a sales job? That the computers are the hot item in, it's not as the transistor radio once was, as the refrigerator once was?
I think it's a sacred, it's kind of magic. It's a magic thing, and it's a way of avoiding responsibility.
And it shifts attention away from the really critical issues, I think, in schools. We act like we've made a significant contribution when, in fact, this instructional problem that teachers have and that schools confront is not solved in any way by putting a computer in a classroom or hooking up to the internet.
But here's one that's...
We've got to wrap it, but would you both agree the best advice is festina lente, make haste slowly on this?
There we go.
Make haste slowly is good, and I would definitely try and understand what they're actually good for.
Good analysis. Thank you both. Alan Kay and, of course, Richard Clark, we thank you both for joining us on Life and Times tonight. Up next, Part 2, à deux.